right now, sorry. Um, Most recently, we're seeing with each passing day, the number of calls for President Biden to publish the Equal Rights Amendment are growing exponentially. And most recently, you'll learn more about this tonight from our incredible speakers. But 46 United States senators wrote a letter to the president urging him to publish the Equal Rights Amendment immediately to restore reproductive rights, to guarantee equality for all, to um, stop the threatened attacks on our rights, and so much more. There's so much more, and you're going to hear all about that today. I'm Nicole Verossi Bates. I am an attorney and the executive director and founder of Shattering Glass, and I am your moderator for today. Shattering Glass has been involved in the 3.5 year effort to get President Biden to publish the Equal Rights Amendment. And we're getting close. So you're going to hear more about that today. We are in a critical moment. And as I said before, we have 47 days. So we've come together, a diverse group of nonpartisan organizations, to form the Biden Publish the ERA Alliance. And the alliance consists of a diverse set of organizations. You have gender justice organizations, you have reproductive justice organizations, you have LGBTQ plus rights organizations, democracy-focused organizations, abortion funds, medical associations. The ERA impacts all of us, but you're going to hear again about that from these incredible speakers. We have Kate Kelly, the Senior Director of the Women's Initiative at the Center for American Progress. Hello, Kate. We have Pat Spearman, the former President pro tempore and Nevada State Senator, and Jack Knoxville, the founder and executive director of the Trans Empowerment Project, and Dr. Cheryl Hamlin. Hello, Cheryl. And last but not least, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand will be joining us shortly. One thing our collection of organizations has done is we've established the Biden Publish the ERA.org website. And there you're going to learn about various action items you can take, because we can't do this alone. This is a critical moment and we need you all to help. It's going to take a loud collective voice to get the ERA over the finish line in the next 47 days. President Biden has the authority, the responsibility, and opportunity to publish the ERA. So as we head into the presentation portion, I want to point out at the bottom, if you have any questions, please click on the Q&A. It's currently showing 19, I see. You click there and you can enter your questions. And at the end of the program, there will be an opportunity after Senator Gillibrand speaks where we will have a Q&A and select some of these questions. To the extent they don't get answered here this evening, we will make those available after the program, probably tomorrow or the next day, but they will be available on our resources page. And you can check it out at bidenpublishtheera.org. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Kate Kelly. Kate is the Senior Director of the Women's Initiative at the Center for American Progress. Before coming to CAP, she was Legislative Director for Representative Cori Bush and helped found the first ever ERA caucus in Congress. She drafted SJRes 39, HJRes 28, which Senator Gillibrand and Representative Bush introduced this Congress, affirming the ERA's validity as the 28th Amendment. She wrote an award-winning book about the ERA, Ordinary Equality, the Fearless Women and Queer People Who Shaped the U.S. Constitution and the Equal Rights Amendment. She has a podcast about the ERA by the same name, and she's on the board of directors of the Alice Paul Center for Gender Justice. And she is also willing to do videos that you will find on our website because she is all in for the ERA. Thanks for coming, Kate.
Of course. Hey, everyone. Very, very excited to be here tonight and to chat with everyone about the ERA. Some very good questions are coming in. So after I speak briefly, I'll try to answer as many questions as I can also in the chat. So keep those coming if you have questions. I'm going to be very, very quick because we want everyone to have time. And so don't feel like if you have questions, please put them in the chat. We'll keep answering them. And even if we're not able to answer them, we can send out a follow-up email answering some of these questions because it is a complicated issue. I'm going to give you 30 seconds of history of the Equal Rights Amendment. But as Nicole mentioned, I have a 4-season podcast about the ERA. So if you really want to know 17 million hours of details about the ERA, it's called Ordinary Equality, and you can listen to that. So 30 seconds. In 1923, the ERA was introduced. It was written by suffragist Alice Paul and Crystal Eastman. In 1972, the first requirement in Article 5, which is that it is passed by both houses of Congress by 2/3 majority. That happened in 1972. So Congress's job is done. In 1982, the deadline was extended that was originally attached to the proposing clause of the amendment. That becomes important. But in 1982, the extended deadline, which Congress already extended once, lapsed and they fell 3 states short. A few more dates that are important are 2017. You'll hear later from Pat Spearman. Pat Spearman led the effort in Nevada to revive enthusiasm for the Equal Rights Amendment, and it was ratified in 2017. States looked around and they said, okay, this is possible. In 2018, Illinois ratified, and in 2020, Virginia ratified. So those 3 states that we were missing from the original push have now ratified. That means the 2 requirements for the Equal Rights Amendment in Article 5 of the US Constitution passing by 2/3 in both houses of Congress and 3/4 or 38 states ratifying. Those have been met. You'll hear us say this time and time again in this call. The Equal Rights Amendment is currently the 28th Amendment to the US Constitution. The American Bar Association recently issued a resolution, and we have some folks on the call who worked on that. It was incredible. And that is the biggest and oldest bar association in the country of legal professionals who say that the Equal Rights Amendment is currently the 28th Amendment and it is enforceable. Why do we talk about President Biden? Why do we say what needs to happen next is that President Biden needs to do something? That is a statutory requirement. So we have the US Constitution and we have laws and statutes that are passed. A statutory requirement is USC 106B, and that says that after the requirements are met for Article 5 of the US Constitution, the person in the government who has to say, okay, is it or is it not an amendment, is the Archivist of the United States. The current Archivist of the United States, her name is Colleen Shogan. She's the first ever female archivist in the history of the United States. And that person is the person who has to certify that all of the ratifications have come in, literally just make a list. So they've been making a list of ratifications since 1970, since it was passed in Congress in 1972. And then that person has to publish it in the Federal Register. That signals to the entire government, okay, the federal government acknowledges that there are now 28 amendments to the US Constitution. The final amendment is the Equal Rights Amendment. So in that statute, the 106B, it says that the archivist must act when they receive notice. So what we're asking, the ask, is that President Biden provide that notice to the archivist that the ERA is the 28th Amendment and that she proceed to certify and publish. I see a lot of folks asking questions about congressional action. There is no further congressional action needed. What Congress is tasked with doing in Article 5 happened in 1972. There are 2 main reasons why congressional action and asking for congressional action is not our goal for this interim period, this lame duck period, where the president has a chance to make the difference to get the ERA across the finish line. The first one is, if we're being realistic, And we're all having to face a lot of hard truths in this current era. The hard truth is that there is no path in the current Congress to proceed with the Equal Rights Amendment. There aren't four Republicans that are going to sign a discharge petition. There just aren't. And even if that were the case, there is not a path in the US Senate to 60, and there may not be in the foreseeable future, if ever again. And so to call for congressional action on the Equal Rights Amendment is to call for its inevitable demise. And so what we're asking for is something that can happen, that the president can do very soon. The president can do any day. All he has to do is send notice in any way he chooses to the current archivist, who he appointed and was confirmed. And then that archivist can proceed to do those two things: certify that the requisite states have ratified, and then publish the amendment. And that is our ask. I'm happy to answer lots of other questions, but I just want to make it crystal clear that what we're asking about is this time period, the time period between today and then the inauguration of the next president. This is the time that we can get the ERA across the finish line. This means that if it's certified and published, the government can print out copies of the United States Constitution, and the ERA will be in there. They could have a display at the Federal Archives. We can begin enforcing it. It will be part of the Constitution, and there are legal challenges that will follow, but that puts pro-equality folks like us in the position of enforcing the ERA and anti-equality folks getting it out. It's going to be much more different and much more difficult, because what they've done since 1923, when they first introduced the Equal Rights Amendment, they've put procedural hurdles, procedural hurdles, procedural hurdles. Everything they think of, the next thing will come. And then they'll just put in another procedural hurdle. So even if Congress were magically in la la land able to remove this deadline, which again, they are not, that is not possible. Even if that were able to happen, that's not going to stop the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court wants to strike down the ERA, they're not going to say, oh, our hands are tied, the Congress voted to remove the deadline. Like, they're just going to put another procedural hurdle. So we're going to have to deal with those hurdles as they come. But this action, getting it into the Constitution, is conceivably possible, can happen in this interim period before we have a new president, and will cement it in the Constitution in such a way that it will be difficult to remove in the future, and put us in a proactive position and put them in a defensive position. So I'll leave it there. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. And next, we are going to have Alexandra Flores-Quilty from Free Speech for People. She is the campaign director. A national Free Speech for People is one of the members of the steering committee. It is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization confronting corruption in government, fighting for free and fair elections, and advancing a new jurisprudence grounded in the promises of political equality and democratic self-government. She has been a leading strategist and an activist in key movements of the last decade. And I will personally say she is the glue that holds this alliance together. We are so grateful for you, Alexandra. Please tell all of our friends here tonight how they can take action.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and hello, everyone. I'm so energized being here with folks tonight, folks tuning in from all over the country as we talk about this really critical opportunity that we have as a nation. As you all know, the stakes couldn't be higher, but we do have this really once in a lifetime opportunity, I think, to publish the Equal Rights Amendment. We know that in order for President Biden to do the right thing and publish the ERA, we need to create a mass movement that will make history and have the ERA into the Constitution. Every single one of us can help build the movement that's necessary for us to win. We need to pressure and have a public call for President Biden to take action in his remaining weeks in office. We need to be loud, we need to be in public, and we need to have a clear, strong message that President Biden has the authority, the responsibility, and opportunity to publish the ERA. If we have a groundswell of support, if we create a public mandate, if we build a strong enough movement, we will win. We can win in the coming weeks. And so there are actions, 3 actions I want to name tonight that are very simple that every single one of us can do. In the chat, we have the website, the Biden published the ERA.org website. And on there, you will see the take action section. There are a number of ways that every single one of us can take action now and continue to take action in the coming weeks of what's remaining in Biden's presidency. The first I want to ask every single one of us to do tonight is to send a letter to President Biden. And we actually have a very simple function on the website where you can directly send a letter to President Biden right now. The more letters we send and generate, the stronger our message will be to the president that we need him to take action now. So I invite you all to go ahead and send your letter to President Biden right now. The second is I want to invite you all to post on social media, all the social medias, Threads, Blue Sky, Twitter, X, Facebook, Instagram, all the social medias, and send a message to President Biden that we need him to publish the ERA right now. Not only will this convey this message to the president, but it will also help create a public visible mandate for everyone else to see and be able to also then join in. And we also have a very easy way to support you to be able to post on social media that's on the Biden published the ERA.org website. So if you go to the website and you see the take action section, there is a button that says post on social media. We have template social media posts that you can just copy and paste and put online if that makes it easier for you. Feel free, though, to also write your own message and put it in your own voice. But would love to see tonight that we can all create together a flurry of social media posts on all the platforms calling on President Biden to publish the ERA. The last thing I want to invite folks to do that will be really, really impactful in the coming weeks is to attend or host an in-person demonstration out in public. Take up space and be visible and call on President Biden and to publish the ERA. If you want to join an existing demonstration that's already being organized and taking place, you can go to the events page of the Biden published the ERA.org website. When you go to the events page, you'll see that there are a couple demonstrations already on the calendar right now. I want to uplift the December 10th demonstration that's happening in DC. So if you are in the Washington, DC area, or you are able to travel, 1 week from today, is it? Yeah, 1 week from today, December 10th, our friends at Vote Equality, which is one of the members of the Biden Published ERA Alliance, is hosting this amazing demonstration in Washington, D.C. that you can participate in. It is family friendly, it is safe, but this is going to be a fantastic demonstration for us to make our message loud and clear. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nicole.
Thank you, Alexandra. Our next guest is Dr. Cheryl Hamlin. Dr. Hamlin is an OBGYN trained at Boston Medical Center. She worked at Cambridge Hospital and Mount Auburn in Cambridge. She's always provided abortion care to her patients, but became more involved after the 2016 election, providing abortions in the South, predominantly at the Jackson Women's Health Clinic. That's the very clinic that was the subject of the Dobbs case. Dr. Hamlin also co-authored a statement on behalf of the Reproductive Health Coalition that calls for President Biden to publish the Equal Rights Amendment. And the Reproductive Health Coalition is a collection of reproductive healthcare professionals, as well as general healthcare professionals, reproductive justice organizations, and allies. And you can find the statement on the Biden Published the ERA website under resources. Thank you for being here, Dr. Hamlin.
Wow, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, hello. Thank you for inviting me. As Nicole said, I'm Cheryl Hamlin. I'm an OBGYN, an abortion provider in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And while I've always provided abortions, I realized after the 2016 election that, that it could go away, and decided to be more proactive. So I started providing abortions in the South, predominantly Jackson Women's Health Organization, the Heart of the Dobbs case, also in Birmingham, Alabama at Planned Parenthood. And so I saw firsthand, the effects of restrictions on abortion care. Both Alabama and Mississippi have very restrictive laws, the so-called TRAP laws, targeted restriction to abortion providers, which included waiting periods up to 3 days, state mandated counseling that often included false information, as well as just a lot of restrictions, making it extremely difficult to open and run a clinic in the South. And so what this means is that women had to travel farther to get the care they needed. Which means they had to take more time off work. It was travel expenses, lodging, childcare, in addition to having to pay for the procedure itself. So for many of these poor women, this was almost financially untenable. Um, all of these restrictions also made women show up later in their pregnancy. Maybe they could come in for their first visit, but then couldn't come back for another week or two. And all this was in the paternalistic guise of protecting women. So one of the things I learned speaking to patients was that everybody's different. Whether the pregnancy was a result of failed contraception, whether it was sexual abuse or coercion, whether they were experiencing fetal anomalies, or maybe it was just a mistake. Everybody's story is different. And, the idea that the government can make laws that would apply to everyone is just ludicrous. And so it's clear to me that people can never truly be equal if they don't have the legal right to make decisions about their own life, their own families, their own health, their own bodies. And so, people understand their own situations, and they know how this pregnancy is going to impact their lives, their careers, their family, their health. They know what their supports are. They know what their financial circumstances are. They know how logistically feasible it is to continue this pregnancy. And so they should be able to make those decisions. In addition, or maybe they know that they were very ill in their last pregnancy, later in pregnancy, so it doesn't qualify as a medical emergency right at the moment, but they know that they were very sick their last pregnancy. They should be able to make their own decisions about their health and how it's going to impact them. As well as they should be able to rely on their own faith. I had a patient tell me that she just wanted her baby to go see Jesus right now because she didn't want it to struggle through the life that she had to offer. Who's to say that she's wrong? Who's to say that their religion, overshadows hers? So in short, people should be able to decide whether they want to have children, how they want to have those children, and, the route they want to take. And so the Equal Rights Amendment is a important tool that can help people decide for themselves what care that they need, regardless of their gender. So thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you. Our next guest is Jack Knoxville. Jack is a multiple award-winning transformational leader who has been fighting for the LGBTQIA plus rights, has been fighting for LGBTQIA plus rights for over 20 years. He's the founder and executive director of the Trans Empowerment Project, which is one of the largest providers of support in the US for two-spirit, trans, intersex, and gender expansive community members. He was the first trans masculine candidate to run for political office in the Southern United States. As an activist and digital strategist who specializes in building equity through centering the most vulnerable communities, Jack also enjoys leading conversations to inspire others to reclaim their power. Thank you so much for being here, Jack.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm really on this call because I think that it's important that people understand all of the ways that these protections show up, and especially when we're talking about healthcare. Healthcare is a big concern for so many people across the country, and I don't know of a community more impacted right now and more scared than, of course, women and femme folks across the gender spectrum. So when it comes to care, especially, I'll tell you right now, for myself, I grew up in the South, okay? As a disabled, multiracial trans person, I've already had such a difficult time finding any semblance of care whatsoever for any reason. It's not just gender affirming care that we get blocked from. It's care, period. Case in point, I recently had an issue where I was having some gallstone, weird gallbladder pains, whatnot, went to go get care, did not get care whatsoever, and it led to enough of an issue. Like, I actually got a phone call back from a surgeon's office with no follow-up from my doctor. I had no idea why the surgeon's office was calling me. So when I tried to get answers, I actually got dismissed from the doctor's office as being problematic because I was asking them whether or not I actually needed surgery. I just needed to know, like, do I have gallstones? How big are they? How many do I have? What's going on? And I was told I was too problematic and released from care, any care at all. I cannot find a doctor within 3 hours of where I live to treat me for anything. And that is only going to get worse, made by the threats that we're hearing from President Trump and this incoming administration that is continuing to target trans people in their attacks for everything. We cannot have these discriminations in place. Trans people exist. I know that for a lot of folks outside of this community, this conversation is new and it's uncomfortable because what you've been hearing is a bunch of rhetoric from people who are not a part of this community, when in fact you need to actually learn that we do exist. We are real human beings. My life is not political. I was born in 1979, well before Trump and Biden started squaring off, and I was trans. I was who I am now when I was born. Same human being. Nothing about that changed. My heart and soul is still the same heart and soul that it's always been. And I deserve the same level of protections as anybody else in this country. And so my organization and other trans folks across the country are joining the fight to make sure that the ERA gets published before Biden leaves office so that we all get the opportunity to thrive and live in an equitable future where we all get the opportunity to do that. And we don't have to stay afraid for our existence. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Our next speaker. I am proud to introduce our next speaker. Was first elected to Congress in 2006 and has served in the Senate since 2009. She's passed major pieces of legislation on gun control, 9/11 first responders, workplace reform, military justice, and veterans health care. She authored the bill to create America's first national paid family and medical leave program and is unwavering in her support for women and their fundamental reproductive rights. It is my honor to introduce the leading champion of the ERA in the United States Senate, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. Thank you for being here, Senator, and thank you for being such a courageous leader.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be joining this call. Thank you to the previous speaker for the personal testimony. It really makes a difference. I want to thank Shattering Glass and Free Speech for People for bringing us together tonight. I also want to acknowledge former Nevada State Senator Pat Spearman, Dr. Cheryl Hamlin as well for emceeing. I also want to thank you for your commitment to the rights of women everywhere. Thank you for standing up for all the unfinished business we have to do in making sure we have an equal rights amendment to our U.S. Constitution. I think everyone on this call knows the history, but suffragists like Alice Paul and New York City's Crystal Eastman drafted this constitutional amendment over 100 years ago. It passed by 2/3 in the House and Senate in the 1970s, and then was sent to the states. Like all constitutional amendments, the ERA requires 3/4 of those states to ratify it. It took a while, but in 2020, Virginia became the final, the 38th state, the 3/4 of states that was necessary to ratify the amendment. So by law, the ERA should have been signed and published by the archivist in 2020 and become the 28th Amendment. Well, why didn't that happen? Obviously, the president at the time was Donald Trump, and he directed his lawyers to make sure the ERA was not published. His lawyers used flawed reasoning in an Office of Legal Counsel opinion, saying that it took too long and it couldn't be published. Now, with Trump becoming president again, and with Republicans set to control the House, Senate, and the Supreme Court, we continue to face an unbelievable threat to women's reproductive freedom. But they're not in full control yet, which is why we're having this call. And if there's one thing that we can do and should do before January 20th, it is to call on the archivist to sign and publish the Equal Rights Amendment. We need to make discrimination on the basis of sex, like all restrictions on reproductive health care that single out gender, unconstitutional once and for all. Why? Because it's our best chance to have protections for reproductive freedom. It's the only way to enshrine equality for all America's women and girls into the U.S. Constitution. It could be used to enhance protections against pay discrimination, gender-based violence, sex discrimination in federally funded education programs or activities. It could help curb discrimination against pregnant people in the workplace, as well as guarantee our reproductive freedom. Too many lives have been already lost because the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. But this is our secret weapon, and it is high time to use it. How do we make this happen? Well, I am pushing on President Biden and the Biden administration to direct the archivist right now to sign and publish the ERA. I also spoke to my Senate colleagues. We wrote a letter and I think we got 46 signatures on that letter, requesting the administration to take a look at this and to direct the archivist to sign and publish it. But I think tonight is about garnering and building a show of support from the American people. We already have the lawyers behind us. The ABA wrote a decision saying that our legal arguments that the 7-year deadline in the preamble is not constitutionally operative. It's not operative for 2 reasons. One, Article 5 does not give Congress the ability to set deadlines. And in the alternative, if you believe Congress can set a deadline, then setting one in a preamble is not constitutionally operative. You would have had to put it in the actual amendment itself, which is what the states actually ratify. So we believe these arguments are the strongest arguments. Pretty much every blue or purple state attorney general has also signed on to a brief arguing these points. So we believe we have the weight of the law on our side. Donald Trump's Office of Legal Counsel memo misstated the law. They said all constitutional amendments have to be done in a timely way from the time they're proposed. That's definitely not true. They cited a 1921 case, but little did they acknowledge the 27th Amendment took 203 years to ratify. So there's no timeliness requirement. So we believe this is the strongest legal argument. I have pitched this directly to President Biden last time I saw him in New York City. He loved the idea. So now it's about creating momentum for his team to get behind him and the rest of us to want to call on the archivist to sign and publish. I believe the archivist, once she hears this from the president, I think she'll have the courage to do so. So I'm optimistic that our advocacy can make a difference. Americans may have elected Donald Trump to be the next president of the United States, but a majority still support the right to reproductive freedom. We need to show President Biden that this is something the American people support before it's too late. So I urge you to go to shatteringglass.org/take action and make your voice heard. The ERA is literally the only constitutional amendment that's ever been proposed that met all the requirements, that got the 2/3 of the House and Senate, as we did in the 70s, and got 3/4 of the states to ratify, like we finished in 2020, and is still being denied certification. So I believe it is absolutely the right time for President Biden to hear from the American people about why this is so important to ensure and enshrine equality for all in our U.S. Constitution.
Nicole, you're on mute.
Not helpful. Thank you so much, Senator. We're grateful for all that you have done to get us to this point and for joining us here tonight. We would not be here without your courageous leadership. And, that letter was just incredible. Thank you. And that helps with the momentum. And that's why we're here tonight. We have the solution. Alexandra, should we just begin to take some questions?
Yes, let's do it. I know we have a ton of really great questions that folks have submitted in the chat, and so our panel is really excited to dig into those.
Okay. Oh, okay. So this question comes up a lot. Why hasn't the president done this already? If it is this simple, it sounds pretty simple for him to do. Anyone?
I have a theory. I'm not your panel, but I can tell you my theory. My theory is that his lawyers are very conservative in their thinking. And I think their view is that this would be something that the American people wouldn't understand, and that this would seem like extreme measures. And my perspective on that perspective is that no matter what state we have had a vote on it, a majority of citizens have voted for equality. Even the Florida ballot initiative that we lost, we still got 56% of the vote in Florida. Red states like Kansas, like Montana, like Kentucky have voted with us. So I think that people may not get into the weeds of what the constitutional requirements are and what the weeds are on precedent, but we have the legal analysis on our side. And I think all President Biden has to do is explain is we've done all the things. And the reason why it's not part of your constitution is because Donald Trump made it so. And he did not cite to valid legal arguments. He cited to made up arguments that aren't true. So I think he just needs to explain it. And I think people would believe him and understand it. And certainly the Republicans weren't afraid of denying us our reproductive rights. Not only do they stack the court with the justices they have, but they also then denied this to be published when it was fully ratified.
I just want to add to what Senator Gillibrand has so eloquently articulated and say I also have had a personal conversation with President Biden at the Christmas party last year. I wore a huge ERA yes button. And when I shook his hand, he said, the ERA, we need to get that done. Did you know it had bipartisan support? Like he's personally very supportive and has supported the ERA since the 1970s. Himself, I think that as always, procedural hurdles are being put in the way. And so we're doing our best to get those arguments to the brightest minds in the White House. And I think the president could show enormous leadership. He has traditionally supported the ERA. Every statement that he's made, whether it's Women's Equality Month, whether it's Women's Equality Day on August 26th every year, they issue a proclamation, they issue a statement, they say they support the ERA. It's in the agenda of the Gender Policy Council at the White House. So there is support, but he really just needs to take this next step as soon as possible. It's the only way.
I'll add one other quick note. I think I just want to offer that as much as folks ask of, why hasn't this already happened? I think to ask ourselves, what will it take for it to happen? in the American public. And that is something that every single one of us has the power to help create. There has never been any meaningful change that has happened in the history of the United States that has not happened without a groundswell of support, without a massive people-powered movement. And I also want to honor and acknowledge all of the people that have come before us and are still fighting right now to have gotten us to this point, to have satisfied every single one of the requirements to ratify an amendment to the Constitution. So shout out to everyone who's tuning in right now who has played a role, big or small, to getting us to that to this moment. And I think that we are really in potentially the final stretch right now. The ERA could be published in the Constitution the coming weeks. And so I invite everyone to join us in taking action and creating the mass movement that we need in order to get the ERA published. And I think that we have to make our voices loud and clear to President Biden that this needs to happen, especially as we face the second Trump administration, which poses so many threats to our communities.
So let me ask, is this the first time an amendment has had issues and hasn't been published?
There's never been an example where 2/3 of House and Senate have passed and 3/4 of states have ratified that it hasn't been published. It's literally the only time.
Go ahead, Kate. I was hoping you would, there are examples of other issues in the prior amendments, right? Like the Senator mentioned the 203 years.
Yeah, so the amending process is not a straightforward amending process. And I think a lot of people, because we don't live in an era where this has happened, like the senator said, a lot of people aren't familiar with this process. Last time that the Constitution was amended was the 27th Amendment, and that was ratified in the 1990s, 202 years and change after it was initially proposed by James Madison. So if 200 years is not too long, then why is 50 years or 100 years that we've been fighting for the ERA? Again, these procedural issues, they're constantly going to fight us on process. We have to be as bold as they are. Like I always say to people, think about if Republicans were one signature away from changing the Constitution.
Yeah, this would be done. The other point, Kate, you're really right on this. The other point is that this will go to the Supreme Court. So I think people should be knowledgeable that this isn't the end. And even Biden's own Office of Legal Counsel issued a memo early on and said, this decision won't be made by the Office of Legal Counsel. It will be made by the courts or Congress. And I just want to play out both scenarios for you. If Congress decided and said, and passed a resolution that said the 7 years in the preamble is non-operative. It was just guidelines. It wasn't important, which the House has already passed 3 times. The Senate, not yet, because we don't have 60 votes. We have 52, I think, that would support this at the most. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, perhaps. Lisa was the co-sponsor of a bill to actually vitiate 7 years with Ben Cardin. So let's just say we vitiated the filibuster, got 51 votes, got that done. After Congress did that, it would be signed and published by the archivist and lawsuits would be filed. It would go up to the Supreme Court. So you're just deciding when you're going to have lawsuits filed and it will go up to the Supreme Court. So I want Biden to do the right thing, tell the archivist to sign and publish. I think she has the courage to do so. She will sign and publish. It becomes the 28th Amendment. Lawsuits get filed, goes up to the Supreme Court. We may well lose in the Supreme Court, but my argument is, one, it's much harder to take away rights after they've been established. So let's roll the dice. And two, if they take away our rights, that really clarifies who they are. It clarifies who President Trump is, who this administration is, that they don't believe in gender equality, which is a huge issue. You can say you're not for abortion because you're a person of faith or you have, a particular worldview, but that's one issue. That's a medical procedure. If you say you're not for equality, that's a civil rights violation to 50% of America. So I think we should be what we're for. We should stand, loud and proud. and be on record. And if he wants a legacy for his administration, there's no better legacy than this. I'm the president that got you the 28th Amendment. I'm the president that determined we deserve equality in the US Constitution. Like, that's a big deal, as he would say. So I think he should do it. Roll the dice. I also heard an argument, just to play it all on the line, that, well, why don't we wait until there's a better Supreme Court so we can actually win? Do you think it's ever going to be a better Supreme Court? And if you do, when? In 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? You have no idea what the world's going to look like and what the priorities are then. We should stand up for what we're for today as a generation. Demand this of our president, who is for equality and believes in women's rights and is for the ERA, as everyone has said. Let him stand with his values. And I just feel like we have to get past some, guardians around the moat there. And I don't know who they are. I don't know why they think the way they think, but I'm hoping that the American people and the women and men on this call can be heard and be powerful in their advocacy. That's all.
And I want to really honor you, Senator Gillibrand, for the leadership that you're showing, because what we're talking about is showing leadership, not making excuses, not putting hurdles, not thinking about all these process questions. Like, we need bold leaders who will show leadership, who will take the next step, who will act as bravely as our opposition does and will. And so thank you so much for everything that you've done, not only to push the ERA, but to show what real leadership looks like, to show what it means to think through the obstacles and then come up with counter arguments and say, yes, I meet you here on your procedural hurdle, but this is the counter argument. Your leadership is inspiring, and I hope inspires others and has already inspired 46 of your colleagues to join you. So thank you for that. And I just want to say that the Supreme Court has only really opined on this question twice before, not directly, because, like you said, this is a very unique situation. But in one of those cases, in Coleman versus Miller, essentially what they said is the amending process is a political question, and it is not for the Supreme Court to decide. So I know that the Supreme Court has no respect for precedent, and they've shown that with Dobbs and many other instances. But it would be extraordinarily against precedent for them to intervene and say, even for originalists, because Article 5, the language is clear, that there are two bodies that get to decide what the Constitution is and how to amend it. One is the federal legislature and the other is the state legislatures. There is no role for the court in the amending process, period. And then the second thing I want to say is this question of when the archivist moves, because I see a lot of folks asking in the chat. With the 27th Amendment, again, that's our most recent modern amendment, the archivist's name at the time was Don Wilson. And Don Wilson acted before Congress. Don Wilson said, if I were to not certify and publish the amendment, then I would be unconstitutionally inserting myself in a process that I do not belong in. So when he got the final ratification, he certified it and published. After that, Congress scrambled and was like, oh, we want to say something. And Congress passed a resolution after he certified and published. So it doesn't mean that Congress can't act. They still could, even after the archivist Colleen Shogan certifies and publishes it. But in our most recent amendment, what happened is the archivist just proceeded.
Correct. And that's why we're urging this archivist to do the same thing. I noticed, Kate, in the chat, people want to ask about the deadline a little more. I'll just give a little more context. When the first vote in the House and Senate was done, Congress put in the preamble, which is the language before the actual constitutional amendment, a 7-year deadline. Now, in contract law and in Article 1 law, which is regular laws, even in treaties, the language that's before the actual amendment is always deemed to be context. It's not operative. And so the traditional reading of Article 1 law, which is not constitutional law, that's Article 5 law, is preambles are for background, context, information, but not what's been agreed to. And even if you survey all the states and who ratified what, not all the states even ratified the preamble. Some states just ratified there can be no discrimination on the basis of sex. So we have very strong analogies or what's the right word? Arguments that are relevant but not dispositive, meaning it's not an exact precedent that says if you have a deadline that's in a preamble or prefatory language or whereas clauses, it's not operative. So that is why we argue so strongly this 7 years is irrelevant. It was just context. There's a broader argument that says you could never set the 7 years anyway because Article 5 doesn't say Congress can set deadlines. You may win or lose that in Supreme Court. There's been various Supreme Court decisions like Coleman and Dillon that talked generally about it, but it has not decided whether Congress can set a deadline. That's why Coleman was saying it's a political question, meaning Congress can do what it wants. The court doesn't decide. But Dillon made the exact opposite argument. So there's no precedent on point that says whether Congress can or can't set a deadline and whether one in a precedent, in a preamble, or in the actual clause is operative. So there's nothing exactly on point. That's why this is a debatable question. Interestingly, every blue and purple attorney general sides with us. They all signed a brief to the DC Circuit that says this. The ABA sides with us. So that's just context for you. But that's why we just want President Biden to stand bold with the law that supports him, which is the weight of the law. Nicole, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you. The next question is, what communities are impacted or protected by the ERA?
I'm happy to just say one sentence or two sentences if we're being real. But the Equal Rights Amendment, the full operative clause of the Equal Rights Amendment is equality of rights shall not be abridged or denied by the United States or any state on account of sex. That on account of sex encompasses many, many communities. So it's not just women. The word women is not in the Equal Rights Amendment. Of course, women experience disproportionate amounts, as Jack mentioned earlier, women and queer people experience disproportionate amounts of discrimination on the basis of sex. So it will certainly cover women and queer people and people who experience discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. But any type of discrimination that someone receives on the basis of sex, those communities will be covered. Some of the most marginalized folks, and I hope Pat is able to join us because she speaks so eloquently to this, that women of color specifically are some of the folks who are most marginalized and also have the most to gain. Polly Murray, who was an incredible trans luminary and legal genius, argued long ago in the 1970s when she spoke in Congress in support of the Equal Rights Amendment that Black women have the most to gain from the ERA. So I think the more marginalized folks are in our society, the more they have to gain by finalizing the ERA.
I think Dr. Hamlin, you can speak to this as well. It's not just even the marginalized communities. The discrimination in these anti-abortion laws and these anti-transgender laws, they are impacting so much more than just the marginalized communities. Dr. Hamlin, do you want to share a little bit about what the medical community is seeing, not just as far as providing reproductive health care, but at large in places where there are restrictions?
Oh yeah, I mean, if you look at healthcare in Mississippi, I mean, even prior to DAS, but certainly it's gotten so much worse. Just sort of the fear and what you can say to patients. Speaking to one obstetrician in the Mississippi Delta said, well, when we're behind closed doors, I'll say things, but I don't give her like written information or because there's just that fear that something will come back to you. And then as a result, I mean, it's all a domino effect, right? So then as a result, some providers are choosing to leave, hospitals have closed. People are deciding not to get training there. So even like the University of Mississippi Medical Center, gets fewer applicants for not just OBGYN, but family medicine, pediatrics, emergency medicine. It can even go into, as we talked about before, like oncology and like how do you treat someone, for their breast cancer if they're pregnant. So it can cross, it can cross many fields in medicine and then affect the healthcare that's available, not just for reproductive health.
Jack, do you want to add?
Yeah, for sure. So throughout, especially this election cycle, there's been so much fear, especially within the trans community, just for existing because of the millions and millions of dollars that were spent on anti-trans ads coming from this incoming administration and the relentless targeting that's being done to center the hate against us for existing because we will not conform to gender norms. So a lot of people are out there struggling with this idea of, do I get to actually be my authentic self and potentially live in fear and have to worry about what I'm going to be met with outside of my door? Or do I detransition and hold myself very closely and not have the freedom to know who I am and to really be able to be my true self? And that's a very real and scary place to be, especially when you've had a taste of freedom, you've had a chance to actually be your authentic self. And now all of a sudden you have the fear of, oh crap, these people know that I'm trans. Now I have to be afraid of what's coming. The same things I can easily say the same thing, especially in terms of like I run a nonprofit, right? Like we have seen where doctors' offices were being targeted by different states wanting the lists of patients and things, who's getting access to gender affirming care. Doctors want to help us. There are so many amazing doctors that are willing to provide amazing care for the transgender community in so many ways. But now, because of the administration and because of the targeting, to what Dr. Hamlin was saying, some of these providers are like, "Ooh, wait a minute, maybe I can't provide this care. I shouldn't put myself in this position," and they're withdrawing some of their support, some of the support that was there before, and that's not okay. We need care. When we go to see a doctor, I should be able to trust that this doctor is going to take care of me as a human being and not withhold treatment from me just because they disagree with my ability to be trans. But
Right.
unfortunately, this is the reality that we're facing.
And to kind of bring all of this back together, tomorrow the Supreme Court's going to hear a case called United States versus Skrmetti. And in the Skrmetti case, the court is taking on sex-based discrimination. And as we heard at the beginning from Kate, there is nothing in the Constitution currently that protects against sex-based discrimination. That was given to us by the courts in 1971, and it was never at the full standard that race, religion, and national origin gets. So it's kind of like this B-level constitutional protection. In this case, sex-based discrimination, as the ABA has warned, is in grave danger. The American Bar Association is in grave danger of being eliminated altogether. So that case will be decided in June. It's a question of how far the Supreme Court is going to go. U.S. versus Skrmetti relates to gender affirming care bans in Tennessee, applicable to minors. But they took on the issue because the end game of the Dobbs decision and this agenda has always been to take away the court given equal protection. This was not just about abortion. This was not about anti-trans laws. This was not about, that's not what this is about. But if we can't establish discrimination going forward, that's going to impact all of the communities. The gender pay gap alone costs $1.6 trillion a year. That impacts so many women and their families and transgender LGBTQ plus people in their families. And it's just, there's a lot at stake here. And if then that gender pay gap impacts the economy in our communities. So Alexandra, do you want to kind of tie it up with some action items?
Yeah. I'd love, I know that we're right at time, so I would actually love to actually do a quick go around with each of the panelists. And panelists, my question for you is what is one thing that you want people who are tuning in tonight to take away? And I will go first so you can think about your answer. And it's exactly what Nicole, my point will be exactly what Nicole was teaming me up for, which is I want you to take away the fact that you have power and whether or not the ERA gets published. We all do. This is the moment. I think that this could be the moment that we've all been waiting for decades and decades, in which it finally gets published. And if we create a strong enough movement, I believe that it will. And so we've sent out the links already. They're on the Biden published the ERA.org website. There is a take action section. There are some simple ways that you can take action tonight and in the remaining weeks. And I think the last thing I'll just say is that in a time when there's so much gender-based discrimination, sex-based discrimination, gender and sex-based violence that we are seeing, this is a powerful way that we can say who we are as a country and enshrine this in our Constitution. And I'm gonna popcorn over to Kate for her response.
The thing that I want people to take away is A, you have a voice and you have power, and you should talk about the ERA until you're blue in the face to everyone you know and to everyone you have in your sphere of influence. The second I would say is and this is not hyperbole, this is the most impactful thing that anyone can do and anyone can work on. We're not talking about a law. We're not talking about something that can be overturned. We are talking about a permanent constitutional amendment. Think about the First Amendment, how powerful that is to protect your speech, to protect, all of the different things. Think of the Second Amendment, how powerful that is, overly powerful. These constitutional amendments will outlive everyone currently on the Supreme Court, everyone in Congress, and everyone living today. This is a permanent amendment to the US Constitution that will help people in 10 years, in 50 years, in 100 years. It is the most important thing that you can work on.
I just want to end by thanking our host, Kate. Thank you for the work you've done over decades. I want to thank Alexandra for her wonderful remarks and her advocacy and leadership. I want to thank Jack for his testimony. I really appreciate all the amazing people on this call. I just want to end with one point. Do not be afraid. What I fear, what I watch in the chat is so much fear. Well, won't we create a bad precedent? Won't we lose? Won't the Supreme Court say no? Won't, you know what? We have to stand up for our equality, period. We have to fight to the very end. And no, if the Supreme Court rules against us, they'll say 7 years is binding. Who cares? Like, it's irrelevant. It's not a bad precedent. It's just a precedent saying Congress can set deadlines. Right now, there's no law that says Congress can set deadlines, and there's no law that says Congress can set a deadline in a preamble and have it be operative. There is no precedent for this. So why not use all your legal power? This is what smart lawyers do. All your legal arguments, you leave it all on the field, and you argue your best case. We have a president, we have a Senate and a Congress right now that we have an opportunity to argue our case, and we don't after January 20th or whatever it is. So we have to use our voices as loudly and proudly and as aggressively as we possibly can. Stand up for yourselves. Stand up for the people you love. Stand up for what's right in the world. Why cower and be afraid that it won't work out? Fight for what you believe in. Maybe it doesn't work out, but if our generation refuses to fight, it definitely won't work out. So I can promise you, fighting is worth it. We have legitimate, strong standing. The people on this call made that possible. And I just want to thank you guys for including me. It's an honor and a privilege to be part of such an amazing team.
Cheryl?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as we talked about, this isn't just about women's rights. This is about everybody's rights and just making sure that we're equal and have equal standing regardless of our gender.
Jack?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, just to really put some extra emphasis on the power part. I mean, I get it. Right now, it feels really scary. People all over the country, some people are decorating for the holidays. Some of us are packing our lives up and running like hell to get to supportive states. So it can be very intimidating. We can feel very powerless at times. Feel that feeling for about 30 seconds, take a deep breath, and let's go. The time is now. We have never had more of a reason to get off our collective asses and to do something to protect the rights of ourselves and so many other people. So now is the time that we need to get educated on what's happening, and we need to show up in all of the ways humanly possible over the next 47 or 48 days or whatever it is. And let's get this thing published so that we can start moving towards a more fruitful future for all of us.
Thanks, Jack. The only thing I want is for everyone to understand that this is the moment. We have this opportunity now. It's here, it's now. We can't afford to wait any longer. We talk about the Skrmetti case. We talk about, possibly waiting for a new Supreme Court. We can't afford to do that because we're going much further backwards. But we have this beautiful moment, 47 days. We need a loud collective voice and we need your help. So take some of our materials, follow us on social. You can follow Free Speech for People, Trans Empowerment Project, Doctors for America, American Medical Women's Association, CAP, Center for American Progress, Shattering Glass. There's a whole host. You can see all of our organizations, participating organizations at BidenPublicedERA.org. And please spread the word, take the actions. We need you. We're going to get it done because we're all ready. Thanks for joining us tonight, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the show.